We'll go ahead and get started. So I wanted to thank you all for coming. Hopefully you found it easy to get here. My name is Myra Martinez. If you haven't met me already, I was the assigned president of this year of the board. We have all of our board members here, so I'll have them introduce themselves and their position.
Well, let's start because I'll finish it.
That's right.
I'm Juan Herrera, I'm the treasurer, and this is my second year as a treasurer. Before I was doing the CEUs.
Hi, I'm Leslie Vaughn, I'm the secretary. This is my second month. I just volunteered last month at our last conference.
Yes.
And so,
That didn't pay off.
I'm so glad to be here. It's a great
So that didn't pay off very well for you.
And I'm Donna Kirby, and I am the outgoing CEU coordinator, and I'll be in charge of scholarships this coming year.
And she's our vice president as well.
Oh, that's
Yes.
Yeah.
She's
I
wearing,
honestly did forget about that.
she's wearing a couple of different hats.
Yes.
And a short disclaimer, if you're interested in joining us, please meet me at the end. We can discuss it. I can give you the application if you're interested. We don't take payments here, but I will definitely give you the address of where you can send your checks to, and then that way I can let you know what we're doing and our anticipated plan for the upcoming year. So with that being said, we'll end it here with Cedric, and then we'll get started.
Okay, thank you, Myra. She's done a fantastic job as president since she took over. We really
Yeah.
appreciate that. I was past president years ago, and I've been your senator to the state senate, TCA Senate, for several years now. And still on the board, still helping out. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate the turnout. I want to pass this around. I have recently responded to an article in the Monitor on Psychology. That's what they send out from APA. And I'd love to send you a copy, so I'm going to pass this around. If you'll give me your email address, I'd like to shoot you a copy of my response. It was all about corporal punishment and the effects on kids and everything, and it mentioned some good parenting education, so it was exciting to read that in there, because we're trying to get the word out about childhood trauma and the effect on personality development, etc. So if you'll do that for me. I don't think we're getting out the word near well enough about childhood trauma and the effect on the growth. I give the society, our American society, a D- for getting the word out to parents.
That's generous.
That's the
And I'm being generous. But the only reason I don't give it an F is because of the fantastic work and the books that Dr. Ross is doing. I mean, he speaks all the time and does the fantastic. He was with Timberlawn for years at their trauma unit. And now is with UBH, that's not United Behavioral Health. That's
Thank you for making that clarification. We get that all the time.
I've struggled with that. It's like UBH, University Behavioral Health, right up in Denton. And I'm sure they're doing fantastic work up there. And so I'm so appreciative that he's taken his time out to come and talk to us. He consults the hospitals in Grand Rapids, Michigan as well, and out in LA. And he's the past president of the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation, which is oftentimes what adults struggle with because of their childhood trauma. And so I'm so glad we're getting that information out. He's the author of 32 books.
Wow.
And just a few papers of 230 papers. Wow, that is fantastic. So here's a handout. I'm sure a little brochure. I'm sure that Christy Lewis, thank you for coming. Works with Dr. Ross. I want y'all to pick that up and take a look at them. And I'm sure refer any patients you need some work on. Let's give Dr. Ross a round of applause. Thank you.
So, just so I don't forget, we have a visiting professionals program, which Christy's the coordinator, obviously, talk to her about it. You can come out, depending on where you live, it's a bit of a hike, out to Denton for any length of time. Most people come for one day. Sit in on groups, sit on team meeting, see how it works, talk to the staff, and you've done it, right?
No, I won't. Oh,
I was saying,
Sylvia's done it.
Sylvia's dearly.
I want to do it all. Okay.
So it's pretty cool, you get to see how it actually operates in reality, and just kind of hang out and see the whole story. So, and you get 5 students for that.
At no cost other than the drive to Denton, which is stressful.
It costs $200 in gas.
But we'd love to have you. This card right here, I'm sorry, it's out here on the table. And it tells all about the visiting professional program, and my contact information is on there. If any of you are interested, just give me a
Yeah,
call.
fabulous.
So the reason, there's multiple reasons, but one reason why I thought it'd be good to have a visiting professionals program is when I was in medical school, one day, and this is in my surgery rotation, it was a smaller hospital, so there's not such a huge crowd in the OR. So there's the anesthetist, the surgeon, me and the intern, and then the nurses. That's it. So right there, watching this amazing procedure, the incision went from here to here, opens everything up, that takes our esophagus, tosses it out, takes a section of bowel out, sews the bowel back up, moves that section of bowel up here, sews it back in, closes her up. 6.5 hours, right there watching the surgeon at work, who's a incredibly amazing surgeon technical. So that's one day. In 4 years of psychiatry residency, the total amount of time when I watched psychiatrists actually working is 4 hours. Less than I logged in one day in surgery.
Wow.
So I said, I don't think that makes sense. So to be able to come in and see how people actually do it in reality, it's very, I think, useful and good. And the model that we use is trauma model therapy, which is what I'm going to talk about. See if I can do one slide at a time. Yep. So Trauma Education Essentials is a company I set up with my daughter, or actually it's her, set it up with me. She's a psychiatrist in Toronto, and we provide webinars and some in-person workshops. So if you go to the website, you can check it out. Plus, there's a free monthly newsletter you can sign up for. Oh, good. And my daughter does a book review every month, and then there's some sort of announcements and some useful like grounding techniques and handouts and things like that. So it's worth checking out. And how cool is that to be in business with your daughter? That's my contact information, so that's my office in Richardson. Email address if you have any questions, want a copy of the paper or something. Want to complain about something.
Email him, not me.
She doesn't know that in my email system I've got a direct bounce to Kristen. And also a website, there's all kinds of info on my website. And these are two of my books. So trauma model therapy, obviously dissociative identity disorder is specific to dissociative identity disorder, but it's written in the same sort of manner, style, approach, which is practical, hands-on, case examples, strategies, techniques, and patient-client conversations so you can see kind of how it actually operates. Really designed to not kill you with theory and references to academia. And trauma model therapy sits on the foundation. So you guys, you know about the $10 fine, right?
Sorry.
Do you take debit cards?
So, trauma model therapy sits on top of the trauma model, which is a general scientific model for the relationship between trauma and all kinds of mental health things, with very detailed research predictions. So it's very testable, scientifically detailed, thought-out model. And then trauma model therapy sits on top of that. And it's got these core components that I'll run through one at a time. Then once we get through that, then I'll get into case examples and questions, clarifications, little mini case consultations at any time is all good. And the two core components are the problem of attachment to the perpetrator and the locus of control shift. And then the other things are not quite as core, but we use all the time. So why is this slide here? So this is a little hippo that was separated from its family, washed up on shore in the tsunami. And thank goodness there was a hippo child protective services available, and this really cuddly, touchy, feely, snuggly substitute mom was available. And it just shows the touching power of mammalian attachment. That's the idea. So this is a little baby hippo. When there's no actual mom there, you've got to make do with foster care mom. Sometimes it's okay and sometimes not. So the core idea here is we're talking about mammals. If you're a mammal and your goal is survival, you got a huge problem the day you're born. You cannot survive on your own. So you're biologically programmed to bond to, connect, attach, be in a relationship with, love, and need to be loved by an adult caretaker. And fortunately, just so that the human race doesn't die out in one generation, the adults are programmed to think the babies are kind of cute. So it all kind of works out in a halfway okay normal family, of which there's 3 in Texas, I heard. But when people come to the trauma program, without exception, it's a big, big, complex, chronic childhood trauma story. With physical abuse, different combinations from person to person. With physical abuse, sexual abuse, family violence, domestic violence, impossible family dynamics and double binds, loss of primary caretakers from death, divorce, substance abuse, being in prison, general chaos. And that's just what's going on inside the family. If we go to the neighborhood, we happen to be somewhere in Syria, there's a whole lot of trauma outside the family as well. But here, fortunately, we don't have so much of that, so mostly inside the family. But if you were in like a really heavy gang neighborhood, there'd be lots of outside the family trauma too. So the problem is when your primary caretakers, upon whom you depend for survival, are also your perpetrators, there's no way you're going to have a secure attachment where it's just, I'm okay, you're okay, everything's nice. So it forces you into, I call it mode A, mode B. Mode A is, I'm okay, you're okay, attached, connected, everything's good. Because mom and dad are reasonable some of the time. Mode B is, you're bad, you're scary, I'm out of there, I hate you, shut down, no. But you can't stay in the shutdown mode because you're biologically dependent. So there has to be an override of your withdrawal to protect your attachment systems for survival. So in order to create this illusion that mom and dad are okay, everything's nice, you've got to put that bad stuff a little bit out of sight, out of mind, which I call dissociating. You could call it fragmenting, fracturing, disconnecting, repressing, suppressing. There's a million different vocabularies, all with their own theories. But basically, you can't feel, know the whole picture all at once. It's too much. And that's the solution to the problem of attachment to the perpetrator. So people come into the program, they've had this giant version of the problem of attachment to the perpetrator, which they're reenacting in their current life, which I'll get into with examples. So we have weird things that we do, like you can't act out, you don't, not only that, you don't have to cook, you don't have to clean, you don't have to do this. There's all the stress and pressures of outside life are gone. And we like people to do things like be mindful, think about their stuff, introspect, do homework assignments. We have 30 hours a week of group therapy, inpatient, and 3 hours a week of individual therapy, all within this trauma model therapy. So you're getting into it, you go to the trauma ed group, we have handouts about this. Okay, so it's starting to sink in. When I was a kid, I loved the people who hurt me. I was hurt by the people that I loved. Both things were true. I had both sets of feelings. It was totally overwhelming. I couldn't possibly deal with it all. I had to put it a little out of sight, out of mind. But now that that's sinking in, I'm starting to feel the feelings of childhood. Small, scared, sad, lost, lonely. So underneath all the diagnoses, the behaviors, the addictions, the acting out, the social roles, is small, scared, sad, lost, lonely. So it's a whole underground ocean of grief. So it's very much a grief novel. Mourning the loss of the childhood that you never actually had, which is just a normal, okay childhood. So that's the problem of attachment to perpetrator. And I always say, who in their right mind would want to feel all those feelings? Nobody, right? Because it's way too overwhelming. So in order not to feel them, you have to drink, drug, act out, distract, do all those different things. But if you want life to be a little different, probably gonna have to learn how to tolerate and process and manage these feelings. Locus of control shift, again, all the time, all the time, all the time. So the idea here is, it's a little bit like attachment to the perpetrator, in that it's not about your race, your gender, your IQ, anything about you personally. Attachment to the perpetrator is just the biology of being a mammal. Here is how kids' brains work. So again, it's not about your culture, your IQ, your gender. It's just how kids' brains work, which is down here at these kind of heights, the mind of the magical child. I'm at the center of the world, the whole world revolves around me, and I've got this magical power to make things happen. It's just how kids think. So in the normal family, you shift the locus of control, which is the control point from inside the parents, inside yourself. And you go, oh, I'm causing everybody to love me and treat me okay because I'm lovable and okay. So you just end up with self-esteem, it's okay, pretty secure attachment, you can go off in the world, take a risk, come back to a safe home base. But we're talking about the big trauma families. So what happens there is you shift the locus of control from inside the parents, because you're at the center of the world and everything revolves around you, inside yourself, and then you know with absolute scientific certainty, I'm bad, I caused it, I deserved it, it's my fault, I'm this, I'm that. And so people come into the trauma program 20, 30, 40 years later, the odd person will go, one thing nobody does is go, Dr. Ross, I have the cognitive error that was my fault. They may say, okay, I really know it wasn't my fault, but I don't believe it in my heart. But most people, absolute scientific fact, total certainty. I'm bad, I caused it, my fault, I deserved it. And that's how I deserve to be treated now, and now I'm a useless piece of whatever. And that's why I tolerate these kind of friendships and relationships and partnerships, because nobody else would want me anyway. So I have to put up with it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. So the locus control shift doesn't just go away in childhood. It gets reinforced over and over, and 25 million times later, it's been reinforced by what the perpetrators do, what they say, and what they don't do, which is protect you and rescue you. And that's before we start talking about the bullies on the playground, the sexually abusive coach, the rape of the frat house, the first abusive husband, the second abusive husband. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. And then you get your own negative cognition, your own negative self-talk, reinforcing it over and over and over and over and over. So by the time somebody comes into treatment, it is really reinforced and ingrained. But why do people hold on to it so hard, other than that's all they know, and it's a habit and it's been reinforced? That's the illusion of power, control, and mastery part. So when you shift the locus of control inside yourself, which happens automatically, it's not an optional offense, you're not powerless, helpless, overwhelmed, or trapped anymore. You've got the problem contained inside yourself. You know what the problem is. All you have to do is decide to be a good little kid. Mom and Dad will see that you're trying harder. They'll forgive you. Everything will be okay. But the problem is it's all magical child thinking. It's not actually factually true. But that illusion of power, control, and mastery buffers you from being just overwhelmed, powerless, helpless, small, scared, lost in the wind. So it's very addictive and you hold on to it very hard. So we want to reverse the locus control shift. We want somebody to go, okay, I get it. It's really starting to sink in. I don't really quite believe it yet, but I'm starting to get it. So first in the head, then in the heart. I didn't deserve to be treated that way. It wasn't my fault. I deserve to be loved and protected like any other kid. The reason it didn't happen wasn't because of me, it was them. I guess I felt pretty small, scared, sad, lost, and lonely. So when you reverse it, get rid of the self-hatred, self-blame, self-punishment, it's not like, hooray, everything's great. It throws you into the powerless, helpless, sad grief. And again, who would want to go there? Nobody, so you don't. In order not to, you hold on to the anger. So as always, anger takes you, if you have a problem with sadness, you can go into anger. If you have a problem with anger, you can go into sadness. So that's the locus of control shift. So I'll give you a quick example, so, which is over and over and over and over. So we have many people who've been battered, either currently are, or in their lives have been battered, spouses, battered partners. 90% of women, 90% of people come to the program are women. Two-thirds, three-quarters are more or less straight. So usually it's a woman who's been battered by a male. But we also have women who've been battered by women. We have roughly 10% guys. Some of them are gay and have been battered by gay males. Occasionally we have a guy, heterosexual guy who's been battered by a female partner, usually emotionally, psychologically. But the huge bulk of it is men battering women. So we're at the battered spouse shelter. In comes the battered spouse. What do we know her behavior is saying, and what does she say out loud? I'm out of there, he's a perp, I don't deserve it, I'm not taking any more, I'm done with that, my kids don't deserve it, that's it. 2 thumbs up, a couple of affirmations, a little social support, we're good to go. Except, this is her 8th visit to the battered spouse shelter. What happened all those previous visits? She comes in, great energy, good posture, clear thinking, assertive, stating the facts. He's a perp, I don't deserve it anymore, which is all true. But then she gets on the slippery slope. Something happens because she goes from point A to point B, which is, I'm out of there to I'm going back there. When she gets on that slippery slope, then the posture kind of goes down, the energy collapses, her speech is more hesitant, her thinking is more ambivalent, hesitant, and we start to hear, well, excuses 1 to 100 for why the husband beats her up. He's been under stress, he's been working extra hours, he's this, he's that. And he's the guy I married, and he really is a good guy. He just sometimes gets angry at me. The real problem is I haven't been a good enough wife. I'm going to go back and be a better wife, then he won't be so stressed out, and he won't have to beat me up anymore. And then we have a treatment failure. But it turns out actually her theory was correct. She goes back home and the guy does forgive her and he loves her and he wants to be married forever and she's really special and here's the box of chocolates and here's this and here's that. And here's the honeymoon phase for 2 or 3 weeks, a month or 2. Kapow, she's back at the shelter. So the problem of attachment to the perpetrator is not a theory about her childhood. It's dominating life in the present. She loves the perpetrator, she's with him. She hates him, fears him, she's out of there. So what's the motto of the battered spouses returning to the relationship? But I love him. Over and over and over. So the magnetic, not counting all the social and economic pressures, the emotional, psychological, magnetic force that's pulling her back is the positive attachment. So if you just go, he's a perpetrator, he's a criminal, he's bad, he's no good, you don't deserve that, all of which is true. You're not dealing with that magnetic pull back. In order to resolve this, so in theory, he could get into treatment and reform, and she could stay in the marriage. That's a theory. But every once in a while that could be true. But for her to actually get out of the marriage and stay out of the marriage, she's got to deal with, tolerate, learn to balance, stand in both sides of the universe. I love him, I hate him. Otherwise, it just goes around and around and around and around and around. And when she starts going, I haven't been a good enough wife, that's locus control shift. That's magical childhood thinking. So again, it's not a theory about her childhood. It's right there in what she says, her thinking, her decisions. And so therefore, we want to focus on that and treat. We want to reverse the locus control shift. But again, if we reverse the locus control shift, it's not, gee, I'm so happy, it's, I don't deserve to be treated this way, I didn't when I was a kid, I don't deserve it now, we're going to have to do something about it, it's scary, kids will blame me, my parents will blame me, this wonderful husband won't pay child support. So I'm not ignoring all the social, financial pressures and factors, it's just not my focus here. So that's locus control shift. And if we go back to this woman's childhood, sometimes it's a kind of reasonable, okay childhood, and the guy was like the clever psychopath narcissist guy. He was Mr. Wonderful, everybody thought he was great. And I don't know how many times, but certainly more than once, but not hundreds of times, I've worked with somebody where there was no physical violence at all up until the wedding, and she got a black eye on honeymoon. But usually it's kind of like the usual kind of grooming process, where start a little bit of control, a little bit of criticism, a little bit of threatening behavior, and it takes 3, 6, maybe 9 months to start escalating up to the first time she gets hit, controlling the bank account, cutting off the family and friends. So it's a whole grooming curve like this. And occasionally, there could be like a decent marriage for 5+ years before that kicks in. But usually, it's kind of months. We go back to her childhood, sometimes normal childhood, but very commonly, it's the raging alcoholic dad. So we're talking about a typical day in age 8 or 10 or something. Her and her sister are playing in the living room, everything's good. Oh my God, that terrifying sound, Dad's car coming up the driveway. We gotta scramble, get everything tidied up. We don't want them to be mad. Everything's tidied up. 2 little girls go and hide in the bedroom closet. Dad comes in. Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes he just goes and passes out. But this day he flies into a rage. He's beating Mom up. Everything's crashing. She's screaming. They're hiding in the closet, listening to it. It gets quiet. They come out. Dad's passed out. Mom's in the kitchen crying. Go into the living room. Oh my God, where's this remote? We didn't get his remote back on his chair. It's my fault. I was a bad little girl. I caused Dad to fly into a rage. It's my fault that Mom got hurt. I'm not going to make that mistake again. So the locus control shift is so locked in and reinforced. If it was a combat veteran, so I've worked with, not thousands, but 100+ combat veterans, who they're in the hospital because they're so suicidal. So they have PTSD and they're acutely suicidal and they've been in combat. Virtually without exception. So you could be a guy who's deployed, goes into combat for some incomprehensible reason, doesn't have PTSD. I don't see how anybody doesn't have PTSD. But he comes home, he's not suicidal. I never see that guy. So I see the guys, and sometimes gals, who are so suicidal they're in the hospital that I consult to. There's probably been like, I'd say it's probably under 5%, I've actually counted. Under 5% of guys who are combat veterans, that suicidal, who've had okay childhoods. Almost without exception, and every time I talk with people who are in the military doing mental health stuff, they all agree, huge childhood trauma. So they had problem attachment of the perpetrator, locus control shift, PTSD, all in place before they turned 18, before they went into combat. And the combat trauma is really just sitting on top of the childhood trauma. It's spiked it way up. It's trauma for sure in and of itself. But the locus control shift is dominating the picture. I'm bad, I'm evil, I'm a monster, I'm a war criminal. It's my fault that the civilian or the other soldier died. And then we walk through in detail the scenario, which could be an IED that blew up a convoy, or it could be a firefight. And it just isn't the guy's fault. It's just unforeseeable, not preventable. He didn't make any error. There's no negligence. So it's all locus control shift. And when he reverses the locus control shift, then he has to deal with, I was powerless, helpless, overwhelmed. I couldn't save my friend. I couldn't save the kid, which is, really sucks a lot. So nobody wants to go there, so they don't. So it doesn't matter the type of trauma or the gender or anything. It's all the same. So we're constantly working on locus and control shift. Dang. Wrong set of slides, sorry. So I left out, let's go back. The problem is not the problem. So there should be slides for these, but they're just pictures that go along with the title. The problem is not the problem. So now we're getting into the additional features that are essential to the model, but not quite as core as attachment to perpetrator locus control shift. So this is just systems thinking, family therapy. The family comes in, the parents are very clear what the problem is. It's the bad kid. You'll find out when you sit down there that that seat kind of goes, whoa. Once you get used to it, it's very comfy. So the parents are crystal clear, the problem is the kid, the adolescent is acting out. So the family therapist has them sit down, talks about things, and quickly figures out, this is the identified patient, this behavior is serving some purpose in the family system. I got to figure out what's the problem in the background, and then I really have to address the problem in the background. If you take a non-systemic perspective, and you're a biological psychiatrist, you're going to say, oh, thanks for bringing Johnny in, thanks for the collateral, and you're going to take him over here and fix what's wrong inside him. That's actually a delusion that psychiatrists have, that they can fix things by medicating the problem. If it's a more psychoanalytical psychiatrist, that psychiatrist will say, thanks for coming in, thanks for the collateral, and it's going to take Johnny away and fix the psychology that's wrong inside Johnny. And all the parents do is drive the kid to the session and sit in the waiting room. But if it's a systemic approach, the intervention is likely to be marital therapy. So this is a new concept. This is sort of advanced theory. Probably never heard of this before. Sometimes it's the parents who are the problem. Yeah, oh, yeah, you have heard of that before. So if you don't think systemically, you can't get to the intervention of marital therapy. You're just focused on the presenting problem, which is a problem. So we take this approach and apply it to everything. All symptoms, all behaviors, all diagnoses, all social rules. We want to know, what's the story? So in medical school, and psychiatry residency, but in medical school I did medical histories. So I had to do like the intake history for somebody who's getting cataract surgery the next day. And it's divided into sections, it's very standardized. And then when you go into psychiatry, you use the same format, it's just the psychiatry history. But I've also written short stories. So I consider the actual history taking and the actual write-up of a person who's in trauma therapy is more like writing a short story, a non-fiction short story about their life, than it is like writing a standard medical history with all its little categories. Okay? So it's all about what's the story, what happened, let's walk through the decades, and then let's understand